Okay, so again, let's assume the same model over here. We have two parties, Alice and Bob. Now the intention of Alice and Bob is to share a secret key amongst each other. They want to share a secret key or a secret value, one secret value, okay, amongst each other. And this particular cipher was incidentally the first published public key cipher. This was the first one. This came before RSA came. All right, and this cipher was designed specifically with the intention of allowing two honest parties to share a secret value amongst each other. So the way things work is, of course, first one step of this cipher is used to share a secret value between the two parties, and then AES is used with that secret key. Okay, this was designed specifically for key exchanging. All right, so let's see how things work. So with this cipher, there are two global elements. Just like with RSA cipher, RSA had one global element, one global modulus. This cipher has two global elements. Okay, global elements are a prime P, a prime number P, and second global element is alpha, which is a primitive root of P. So a primitive root of P, which is alpha. Okay, prime P. P is the prime number. These are two global elements and have to be pre-decided before moving forward with the algorithm, with the cipher itself. Now you might ask me, what is a primitive root? Let us, let us keep that discussion, till at a later stage. I will tell you what primitive roots are. Okay, so but I will tell you what they are and why do we need a primitive root in this particular case. I will explain what the primitive roots are, what exactly are primitive roots. But let's just hold back our discussion on primitive roots in details. Let's see the cipher first, and then we will come back and explain what primitive roots are and why is it important for us to use a primitive root in this case. What will happen if we do not use a primitive root? And of course, alpha will be less than P. Okay, alpha less than P. Okay, a prime P and a primitive root alpha that is less than P. And here is how this works. Okay, so Alice will first select her own private key. Okay, Alice selects her own private key first. Okay, so Alice generates her own private key. Okay, Alice has her private key. Her private key will be XA and her public key will be YA. Let's just name it that way. And Bob's public key will be, private key will be XB and Bob's public key will be YB. Okay, so generate private key. Okay, so let me just, for a reference, let me just mention it. So right here, let me say X our private key and the Y is our public key. Okay, so that will, so generate XA, which is generate her peak at random XA less than the prime P. Okay, so Alice will choose the private key XA, anything which is anything less than P. Okay, so the key range is 1 through P. So P, the prime number must be more than 128 bits. Okay, so that's what. So I mean, P is a large enough prime number. So that's what. Now, similarly, simultaneously, Bob generates his private key. So generate XB again less than P. And of course, the private keys are to be kept secret. All right. Okay. Next, Alice computes her public key as compute ya, which is her public key, as alpha to the xa mod p. Okay, alpha to the xa mod p. That's how Alice generates her public key. And Bob simultaneously generates his public key as or computes. Alpha to the xb mod p. Okay, so at this point, the pairs, each pair of public and private key has been generated by both the parties in communication. And at this point, the next thing is Alice will share her public key ya to Bob, and Bob in turn shares his public key yb to Alice. Okay, clear. At this point of time, Alice has yb, that's Bob's public key, and Bob has ya, that's Alice's public key. At this point of time, they have each other's public key. Now is the secret value calculation stage. Now in the next step, Alice computes secret key Ka is equal to yb raised to xa mod p, which is calculated by Alice, and simultaneously Bob computes the secret value, secret key kb on his side is equal to ya raised to xb mod p. Okay, I claim that Ka equal to Kb equal to K is the secret key shared between these two parties at this point of time. So with this algorithm, I claim that they would have computed the same value on each side. I will prove that, but I will allow you to stare at this for a moment and ask me any questions that you might have before I prove that. It's two modular exponentiations at each side. One to compute the respective public keys and the other to compute the secret values on each side. That's all what is required, and that's all what is done in this cipher. And at that point of time, they will share a secret key K, which is equal to Ka and which is equal to Kb, the respective secret values computed by each parties at that point.
And all of these are integer values?
Everything is integer, yes.
So could you theoretically, if it reduced, you could do like, square root of something, and then I know that's, a repeating decimal, but if the math worked out to where it wasn't a repeating decimal at the end, could you technically use something other than an integer, or would it always lead to?
No, the way the primitive roots are defined, it cannot be anything other than an integer. This algorithm will not work.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a good question actually. So his question is, are every single values that we see over here, are they supposed to be integers? The answer is yes. The way primitive roots are defined, it has to be an integer. Everything has to be integer. Otherwise, this will not work. I mean, the secret value will not be computed, the same value cannot be computed on both sides. But to be honest, I have not dug very deep into it. I mean, I did not really research in theory, but if you are interested, then Dr. Asai is a person you might want to talk to. I mean, he does a lot of theoretical stuff with numbers. So if you want to play with numbers, if you are more interested playing with numbers, of course, we'll see some of those here. But if you are more interested to do, he's doing some quantum cryptography as well. Dr. Asai Thambi. If you get more interested into this, then he's something that you can approach. He's someone you can approach to do a directed independent study on. I remember one student did a DIS with him on cryptography, quantum cryptography, where you would see the intricacies of doing things like that. Okay. But that was a good question. Any other questions at this point? Okay, before I proceed on proving the correctness of this algorithm, or maybe I should first prove the correctness before I proceed about the security issues. Okay, first let me prove the correctness of this algorithm. Okay, so in other words, I want to prove that these two values are actually equal. I want to convince you that those two values are actually equal. They have actually computed the same value. Okay, so let me just use this part of the board, the lower part of the board, to do that. So let me start with one of those values. Okay, so let me start with Ka. So Ka equal to Yb to the Xa mod P. So what is Yb? Yb is alpha to the Xb mod P. So let me plug in that value over here. So that is equal to alpha to the Xb mod P to the Xa mod P. Okay, by the rule of modular arithmetic, I will not go into that rule, but that rule is explained. You know, there is a separate chapter on modular arithmetic that we skipped. That explains that you can remove one of these mods and it will still be the same value. So I can strike out either the inner one or the outer one. Doesn't really matter. So let's strike out this one. So this becomes alpha to the Xb Xa mod P. I can interchange this Xb and Xa in the exponent, this product, and it still remains the same. This equals alpha to the Xa Xb mod P, and now using the same rule of modular arithmetic, I can bring back the modulus again. So this becomes alpha to the Xa mod P to the Xb mod P. And what is alpha to the Xa mod P? It's Ya. So this value is actually, let me use this part. This is Ya to the Xb mod P, which is essentially equal to Kb. So this is equal to Kb. You see, very simple but very elegant. Just works like a magic. This concept, this mathematical concepts of modular exponentiation, or just in fact modular arithmetic, pre-existed this cipher long back. Euler, Euclid, they are historic figures, historic mathematicians. But the application of that did not exist till Diffie and Hellman did the first such application in the 1970s, which is why the field of public key cryptography is very new. But the mathematical concepts, the foundations, they existed long time back. Okay, we'll pause for a bit. Do you have any questions? So now that proves that they compute the same secret key on both sides. And that's how a secret value is successfully exchanged between the two parties in communication. And now you can use this secret value as a key for advanced encryption standard and use a symmetric key cipher. And that's how what is done. That's how it is done. That's exactly how it is done. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. If you don't have any questions, then let me bring in the bad guy inside here. So now suppose we have a hacker. The next thing that we will try to see is what does the hacker know? What is the knowledge of the hacker? How many things are here? There is XA, which is the private key of Alice. XB, the private key of Bob. YA, public key of Alice. YB, public key of Bob. And there is the prime P and the primitive root alpha. And of course, there is the technique modular exponentiation, which is of course known to everybody. It's just two modular exponentiations over here and two over here. Does the hacker have knowledge about XA and XB?
No.
No. So these two are not known to the hacker. Does the hacker have knowledge about YA and YB? What about YA and YB? Yes or no?
Yes.
YA and YB?
Yes.
Yes.
The public keys.
Yes, they're public keys. So once these are exchanged in clear text. These are not encrypted. They are exchanged in clear text because they are public. They have to be shared anyway to everybody. What about phi and alpha? What about the primitive root and the prime? Are these secret or are these public elements? Any idea? The primitive root alpha and the prime P, are they secret or are they public? Are they known to the hacker or are they not?
So
What do you think?
we didn't go over it, but in order to calculate the private keys, we don't have an equation for that.
Not the private keys, the public keys.
Yeah. So if is it phi? Phi and alpha, those are used to generate the private key.
The public key. The private key is only randomly picked and has to be smaller than the prime.
Okay, so that was my question. Yeah. So yeah, the hacker can know those.
Yes, the hacker can know this. These two are also given out to the hacker. And now see the security over here. So now for the fast modular exponentiation, you see YA is known to the hacker, alpha is known to the hacker, P is known to the hacker, XA is not. So finding out XA will be discrete logarithm problem, which will be hard, which is why there is one level of secrecy, that is the private key. Okay, that is how secure the private key is, because solving for it is a discrete logarithm problem. These three values are known. YA is known to the hacker, alpha is known to the hacker, The modulus P is also known to the hacker. The prime P, basically, which is the modulus essentially. All three are known to the hacker. The private key is not, but solving for it is solving the discrete logarithmic problem, which is why that is secure. And even over here, secret key is actually unknown. Okay. Why B is known? The modulus is known, of course, P is known. So again, in this case, two values are unknown. Alright, so but if we assume the hacker somehow gets an old key. Okay, so most of the times, all of the times these are called session keys. If you initiate a new session of communication, one step of this is done, and then the key is generated. The key remains as long as the session goes on, and of course in the session you use symmetric key encryption to communicate with your receiver. And once the session ends, the key is discarded. The next time you want to start another session, this thing has to be done once. It has you Diffie-Hellman and you Diffie-Hellman the key, the secret key between the two parties, and then you do a new session. So suppose an old session key is somehow captured by the attacker somehow. That also is equivalent to solving the discrete logarithmic problem. So the secret key, basically the private key, still remains secure. Okay, an old session key might be somehow gathered by an attacker, but that also does not compromise the private keys, because it's still again solving for discrete logarithm. So that gives the discrete logarithm, the hardness, the presumed hardness, computational hardness of discrete logarithm provides security in Diffie-Hellman. Of course, you will see there is an elliptic curve version of this as well. So sometimes, let's see if I can show you at least one certificate. So, okay, let me share my screen. So suppose I'm looking at this website. Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see my Chrome?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, suppose I'm looking at this website, UNF Zoom US or something. So you see it has transport layer security, so that this lock tells you that. If I click on this lock, it says connection is secure. And let's look at the certificate. It will at some level tell us this particular certificate. In the details, this is your certificate. So at some level, it will tell us what protocols are used for what value. Okay, so if we probably some level of details are not there, some level are there. So let me see how much it tells us. So issue or name, blah, blah, blah. Serial number, signature algorithm is the hash. You see signature algorithm is hash with RSA. So RSA is used for encryption. So it's for signature. For digital signature, RSA is being used. I mean, the same cipher that we reviewed in the last class. You see RSA is being used over here. Public key is RSA encryption. Let me see if they have. The public key is given. This is your public key, because public key is public. You see your browser's public key, this particular website's public key is given to you. So if you want to do a secure communication, your browser, which is the client, is using this particular public key to encrypt it. Okay, so the public key is given. Or if you want to verify a digital signature, something will be when something is sent by us.zoom, unf.zoom US to your browser, that digital signature is verified by using this public key. So you see, this is how public key is mentioned. Public key is public. This is your public key. Okay. This is your public key, and it's of course hexadecimal. I can convert into decimal. I mean, I can convert this into binary. One hex is 4 bits. So F is 1111. 8 is 1000. Okay, and then you can see it's a long public key. It's of 2048 bits. That's 256 bytes. Okay, if you multiply that with 8, you will get 2048. Right, so that's what key usage. I'm just looking to see whether they mention about the exchanging algorithm, key exchanging. No, key exchanging algorithm is not mentioned. Signature algorithm is mentioned, but key exchanging algorithm is not mentioned. Okay, key exchanging is not mentioned, probably Diffie-Hellman. All right, when we do some hands-on projects, you will see probably Diffie-Hellman is used, either the regular version, which is the modular exponentiation, or the elliptic curve version. If it is the elliptic curve version, you will see, oh, you see, in this case, this signature algorithm right here is ECDSA. That is elliptic curve version of DSA algorithm. We are not going to review DSA algorithm, but in the first slide, this is one of the public key ciphers that are available. It's there on the textbook. If you are more interested to know, we won't have time to review DSA, but it is also used for digital signature, another algorithm, another public key cipher that is used for digital signature. And in this case, you see the elliptic curve version of it is used for the signature. So EC, if you see, that stands for elliptic curve. For even Diffie-Hellman exchanging, you might find simply DHE mentioned, which stands for the modular exponentiation, the classic version, which is this. And if you see ECDHE, that stands for elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman exchanges, which is the elliptic curve version of the same thing. Works the same way. It's only the modular exponentiation get replaced by an elliptic curve multiplication and division. That's all what happens, but works exactly the same way. Again, so going back to what we were having, the discussion we were having, the finding out, solving for the private key in each case for the attacker would be to solve discrete logarithms, which is what gives security in this particular case. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then I will come to explaining what is primitive root first of all, and why is it important to use a primitive root in this case. What will happen if we do not use a primitive root, or we just use just an integer less than p? Okay, as the exponent, I mean, as the base, we use primitive root to compute the corresponding public keys, the respective public keys of the two parties. We use alpha as the base. If we do not use a primitive root there, what might happen? And to answer that particular question, we need to first know what is a primitive root. Okay, let me try to pull up another slide over here. Okay, so I believe the concept is covered in an earlier chapter. We skipped that concept. I just used that as and when required, but we need that concept over here. So there is a table of modular arithmetic. Probably this is not the one. Let me see. Okay, yes. Let me just give an example that way things are much easier to explain. Excuse me. Let me share this. Give an example and then explain things. Okay, so now just to exemplify, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to exemplify this. Yeah. Suppose the prime is 19. Okay. Suppose p is equal to 19 over here. The prime number we are dealing with, we are taking a concrete example. Suppose the prime number p is equal to 19 is a very small number, but nevertheless it's a good example. So this particular table gives you the powers of integer modulo 19. So what that means is, if you take the base as 1 through 18, okay, then this table gives you So there are two things over here. One is the base and the other one is the exponent. So basically, so if the base is equal to alpha and if the exponent is equal to I, what the table gives you alpha raised to I mod 19, mod t which is mod 19 in this case. Alpha raised to I mod 19 and alpha ranges from 1 through 18, I also ranges from 1 through 18. Okay, both alpha and I ranges from 1 through 18. So if you look at the table, it is an 18 cross 18 table. So the table is 18 cross 18. A or alpha. Okay, so that in that case, it is mentioned as A. Okay, just read it as alpha. And the exponent is I. So basically what the table gives you, it's an 18 cross 18 table where the rows represent alpha, the value of alpha, and the columns represent, okay, yes, the rows represent the value of A or alpha as mentioned over there, and the columns represent the value of I, which is the exponent. Okay, so now let's read this particular table first. Suppose alpha is equal to 1, alpha starts from 1, the value of alpha starts from 1. So this is 1 to the 1 mod 19, that's equal to 1. This is 1 to the 2 mod 19, that's equal to 1 as well. This is 1 to the 3 mod 19, that's also equal to 1. 1 to the 4 mod 19 and so on. Okay, let us read one row and then we will understand it very, very clearly. Okay, I will just do one row and I will use this part of the board to do that. So everything is there. Let's read the row of alpha is equal to 2 and p of course is equal to 19. Okay, let's read what is that. So the first space, which is this one, which is this, gives you the value of alpha to the 1 mod 9, so which is equal to, in this case alpha is equal to 2, so 2 to the 2 raised to 1 mod 19, which is just 2 mod 19, which is 2, which is value, which is why this is 2. In modular arithmetic, of course, if the base is less than the modulus, that is the remainder. Okay, that is the answer. So 2 is less than 19, so 2 mod 19 will be 2. So the next element over here is 2 to the 2 mod 19 is equal to 4 mod 19 is equal to 4, which is why this one is 4. Okay. The third element is 2 to the 3 mod 19 equal to 8 mod 19 equal to 8. The fourth element here is 2 to the 4 mod 19, 2 to the 4 mod 19 equal to 16 mod 19 equal to 16 again, because 16 is still less than 19. Okay. Then we have 2 to the 5 mod 19, which is equal to 32 mod 19, which is equal to 13, because 32 minus 19 is 13. Okay, so 32 divided by 19 would leave a remainder of 13. Then we have 2 to the 6 mod 19 equal to 64 mod 19. 93s are 57, so that would leave a remainder of 7, which is why it is 7. And this way we go up to 2 to the 18 mod 19. Do you understand what is this? Do you understand how to read this table now?
Yeah.
So so it's an 18 cross 18 table where the rows represents the base and the columns represents the exponent. The base ranges from 1 through 18. The columns also range from 1 to 18. Now, if I do not tell you, at this point, you still don't know what primitive roots are. But can you just have a look at the table and have a wild guess as among 1 through 18, among alpha range values of 1 through 18, just based on looking at this value of this table, can you tell me what are the primitive roots of the prime 19? Any wild guesses? Just by looking at this, the values that the modulo divisions generated, modular exponentiations generated, can you guess what are the primitive roots of the prime 19?
I'm going to guess 2, 3, 10, 13, 14, 15.
Correct. For the rest, did you understand why he guessed that? Why did he guess that? Okay, why did you guess that?
Well, they're all the same on the table. And also, I'm not sure the significance of why boxes are there, to be honest.
Okay, he guessed that because let me rephrase his answer. Because 2, 3, then 10, then 13, 14, and 15 generated all possible values of modulo division of 19, the exponents. So when you divide something by 19, the remainders can be only 1 through 18. Okay, now we have 18 integers over here. So the powers of 2, the powers of 3, the powers of 10, the powers of 13, the powers of 14, and the powers of 15, when performed modulo division by 19, produced unique, all 18 unique integers that can be produced from modulo division 19, which is why 2, 3, 10, 13, 14, and 15 are primitive roots of the prime 19. So the definition is the primitive roots of any prime number would generate all possible values from 1 through p minus 1. If the prime is p, there can be p minus 1 possible remainders when anything is divided by any integer p or a prime p. Okay, so a primitive root is one whose exponents will generate all possible that number of that integers. For every other values you see, there will be repetitions. For example, let's look at 7. You see, for 7 we have 7, 11, 1, then 7, 11, 1, then 7, 11, 1 repeating. For 8 we have 8, 7, 18, 11, 12, 1, again 8, 7, 18, so that's the repetition. For 9 we also have a repetition. Some repeat more frequently, while some others repeat less frequently, but they repeat. Okay, for all the rest that are not primitive roots, you have repetitions. I mean, that is the concept. You don't really need to know the whole theory behind it, but then that is primitive root. A primitive root would generate all powers of integer modulo 19 with those exponents, with exponents ranging through 1 through 18. And now we can generalize this for any prime number p. For any prime p, this table will be a p minus 1 cross p minus 1 table with the columns for the p minus 1 possible exponents and the rows for the p minus 1 possible bases, and those bases that will produce every single p minus 1 integer, every possible single p minus 1 integer on modulo p are the primitive roots of the prime p. Any questions? And now that is a definition, and now by looking at this we'll see why a primitive root will be a better choice for alpha. If we choose any other integer other than a primitive root, what might happen? What security issue might happen here? Why is a primitive root a better choice? We'll look at this example right here, and then we'll calculate some numbers.
Well, won't you have collisions do the repetition?
Correct. You are getting it already.
Here's another one. What is the largest primitive root ever calculated? Or is that even a thing?
What is the largest of a given prime number?
Yeah.
It can be any. Okay. I mean, to answer your question, there are. You don't have to look at this p minus 1 cross p minus 1 table to get a primitive root. Okay, there are efficient algorithms to compute a primitive root. Fortunately, Otherwise, this would become very inefficient because it is exponential number. Because P will not be as small as 90. P will be a very large prime, at least more than 128, even, maybe 500 bits long or something. So that large number cross that large number, that table will be huge. So if you had to look at exponentially large, that will not be an efficient algorithm. The brute forcing will not be a good way to find a primitive root of a given prime. There are more efficient algorithms for that. And now what will be the largest primitive root will depend on the specific prime number. Again, if you are more interested, I don't know whether there is a good formula, but if you are more interested in this, do talk to Dr. Asai, because he does these numbers. He plays with numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking this is based on a prime number, and
Right, yes.
we don't know the largest prime. Basically, we don't know the largest primitive root either. So
we don't know the largest primitive root either. Yeah. And I'm not aware of if there is any formula to predict that for a given prime number. But I'm glad that you are asking all of these questions. At least, it suggests that you understand what is being explained here. Now let's see why a primitive root is a better choice. Okay, so we'll do some calculations on this particular table with a primitive root and without a primitive root, and we'll see what difference does it make. Okay, so okay, suppose we have, of course, P is equal to 19. We choose P is equal to 19, the prime equal to 19. And in one case, we'll have a primitive root, and another case will not have a primitive root. Suppose we have a primitive root first. Suppose alpha is equal to 2. Okay. So YXA and YA, and versus, suppose we have P is equal to 19 and alpha is equal to 7, which is not a primitive root. Okay, so what might happen? Okay, so suppose XA is generated, and each way will do that. Okay, so suppose let's see what will be a good number. Suppose XA, Alice picks XA as equal to 4. Okay, which is a valid. And suppose Bob picks XB equal to, let me get a good example, 7. All right. So in this case, when it is a primitive root, when alpha is equal to 2, taking alpha is equal to 2, a primitive root, YA will be equal to alpha to the XA, so that is 2 to the 4 mod 19, which is equal to what? 16. Okay, so YA will be equal to 16 in this case. Taking alpha is equal to 2, and YB will be equal to 2 to the 7 mod 19, and that is equal to, if we look at the table, we can find the answer. 2 to the 7 mod 19 is 14. Okay, and then they will exchange these values. All right. But then now let's look at if alpha is equal to 7, what happens? Now let's look at this value. Let me use a different color to suggest what will be the value. So for alpha is equal to 7, okay, let me just erase these lines. For alpha is equal to 7, YA will be equal to 7 to the 4 mod 19, which is equal to 7 to the 4 mod 19 is equal to 7, and YB will be, which is the public key of Bob, will be 7 to the 7 mod 19 also equal to 7. Do you understand the problem now? Now you see, they will exchange their keys over here first of all. And if you do not use the primitive root, you can accidentally compute the same public key. That will give out more information to the attacker first of all, because the attacker will have lesser choice now to brute force. Okay, now this gives the attacker much lesser choice. Okay, if you want to brute force for the private key now, this gives the attacker much lesser choice. The search space becomes much lesser because it repeats. The attacker knows these values, by the way. The attacker knows P, the attacker knows alpha. So immediately whenever the hacker sees that, okay, it's not a primitive root, the attacker generates the table and now the choice becomes much limited if I want to brute force for XA or XB. Okay, that's one. The second thing is that they accidentally have calculated the same public key, but now they don't know whether they have accidentally picked the same private key, because it's not a primitive root. And then there are other values, like they have different private keys but they have the same public key. But on contrary, if you use the primitive root, the only time that you can have the same public key calculated is if you have chosen accidentally the same private key. You might, because these are independently picked, there is a probability, definitely it is much lesser, very less, it's 1 over p squared. Okay, because you are independently picking any number less than 1 over p minus 1 squared, p minus 1 whole square basically. So you are picking anything between 1 and p minus 1 independently. So, but there's still a probability that they will accidentally pick the same private key. Okay, if you do that, if you choose a primitive root as the base, that will tell you that you have done that accidentally, because that is the only way you can have computed the same public key. And if Alice and Bob sees that they have computed the same public key, and if a primitive root was being used here, then they will do the process again until they get a defined public key. That will tell them that now you are good, you have 2 defined private keys. Otherwise, the private key becomes public, because I know what I have chosen, and now if I have a primitive root, and if I see the same public key, I know the other party has also selected, accidentally picked the same private key. So I know his private key as well. In that case, what I will do is I will do these steps again until I get a different public key, different than the other party in communication. Do you understand? So there are 2 things the primitive root gives you. It tells you whether you have accidentally picked the same private key, because if you do not use the primitive root, you might have defined private keys, but you still might have computed the same public key. That leaves the attacker with much lesser choices to brute force over. Okay, because the attacker knows what values will. So you see, for example, if the attacker sees 16 and 14 over here, okay, this is a very less number. 19 is a very less number, but for a very big number, but for a very big time, the attacker has to go over all possible values to brute force for XA. But if the attacker sees, attacker knows that it's not a primitive root, the attacker would know which values would likely produce 7. Okay, what value will likely produce 7? In this case, the attacker does not know. Okay, has to go over all possible values. In this case, the search becomes much lesser, because the attacker knows the repeating pattern. So it's definitely not going to be p minus 1 values that attacker has to go over to solve for XA. So solve for the exponent. That is one part of it. The other part is if you accidentally chose the same private key, if you do not have a primitive root, that will not tell you that you have done so, because different values of private key can also produce the same public key, as in this case you see. But if you choose a primitive root, that will never happen. Same public keys will never get calculated if you did not accidentally choose the same private key, in which case you can repeat the first 2 steps again until you get defined public keys calculated, in which case you know that you don't know each other's private keys. So was that clear? Do you understand? Were you able to see the board first of all when I spoke the last time?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so did you understand? These are the 2 reasons why primitive roots are used. One, to make the choices for the attacker much higher. Definitely you want that many. You want the attacker to brute force over all possible to be able to compute the exponent, which rules out brute forcing, because there is a possibility of brute forcing over there, because the attacker would know these three values. So the attacker can simply brute force over 1 through p minus 1 for the exponent. One will hit definitely. I mean, for 19 it's a very small number, so it might sound to you that okay, I know the answer immediately, of course. But in reality, the prime p will be much larger, very large. But then if you do not use a primitive root over here, the search space becomes immediately curtailed, because the attacker will also know what repeats. So much lesser number of values the attacker has to brute force over to get the private key. That's number one. Number two, choosing a primitive root would tell you if you accidentally chose the same private keys, which is also not desirable, because if you choose the same private keys, then you know each other's private keys. If you choose a primitive root, if you pick a primitive root as alpha, as the base, that will tell you if that happens, because that's the only way you could have computed the same public keys. Otherwise, public keys will always be different if you choose different private keys. If you do not choose a primitive root, that also might not happen. You might have the same public key values with different private keys as well. So that doesn't help you either. Okay, we have ran out of time now. I will post the next project for you, but if you have any quick questions, I would be happy to answer. We'll continue this discussion, because we still not have evaluated the security of this cipher. We'll still continue discussions on this cipher the next time, like next week when we meet. But did you have any quick questions that I might be able to answer?
I just want to get a screen cap real quick of the entire board.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
this video will be shared with you anyway, but if you, sure. Are you done?
Yeah, I just keep the screen caps for quick reference.
Right, definitely. All right, so have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Tuesday again. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming.